What if I told you that the most fundamental assumption about your existence is completely wrong? According to Seth, the consciousness entity channeled through Jane Roberts for over 2 decades, you're not actually alive in the way you think you are. You've already died, and what you're experiencing right now is a continuation of consciousness in what we call the afterlife. This isn't some mystical fantasy. Seth explains that consciousness creates physical reality, not the other way around. Your brain doesn't generate your thoughts. Your consciousness projects the brain, the body, the entire physical world you think is solid and real. Those moments of déjà vu, that strange familiarity with people you've never met, that persistent feeling that something about reality seems slightly off. These aren't glitches. They're evidence of your soul's timeless nature bleeding through. Ancient mystics understood this truth, while modern science insists on the backwards model that matter creates consciousness. But if Seth is right, everything you believe about life and reality itself needs to be completely reconsidered. Think back to the last time you walked into a place you'd never been before, yet somehow knew exactly where the bathroom was. Or met someone and felt like you'd known them for decades within minutes of conversation. Most people brush these moments off as coincidence or intuition, but Seth revealed something far more profound. These aren't random occurrences. They're memories bleeding through from experiences you've already lived. When Jane Roberts first channeled Seth's explanation of our current state, one of the most startling revelations was how consciousness operates outside the linear time framework we've been conditioned to accept. According to Seth, what we experience as déjà vu, prophetic dreams, or instant recognition isn't mystical. It's evidence that we're accessing memories from a death we don't consciously remember, now navigating what Tibetan Buddhism calls the bardo state, but which Seth described with far more precision and scientific understanding. Consider your recurring dreams for a moment. Not the obviously symbolic ones about flying or being chased, but those mundane dreams where you're living in a house you've never seen yet know intimately. You know which floorboard creaks, where the light switch is in the dark hallway, how the morning sun hits the kitchen table. Seth explained that these aren't dreams at all. They're memories of other probability frameworks you've inhabited, bleeding through because in our current afterlife state, the barriers between different reality systems are more permeable. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the bardo as an intermediate state between death and rebirth, but Seth's teachings reveal we're not waiting to be reborn. We're actively engaged in a sophisticated learning laboratory that we mistake for ordinary life. This explains why certain people feel immediately familiar, while others remain strangers despite years of interaction. We're recognizing consciousness signatures from previous shared experiences in different reality frameworks. Seth's sessions with Jane Roberts contain detailed explanations of how time functions as a simultaneous phenomenon rather than a sequential one. In one particularly profound session, Seth described how what we call past lives are actually parallel experiences happening concurrently with our current awareness. This isn't reincarnation in the traditional sense. It's consciousness exploring multiple probability systems simultaneously, with our current awareness representing just one focal point among many. This framework explains phenomena that conventional psychology struggles to address. Why do some children exhibit inexplicable phobias with no traumatic origin in their current experience? Seth revealed these as bleed-through effects from other probability frameworks where trauma occurred. Consciousness carries these imprints across different reality systems, creating seemingly irrational fears or attractions in our current focus. I know how radical this sounds. Your rational mind is probably generating objections right now, and that's actually healthy skepticism. But consider the alternative explanations for these experiences. Mainstream science offers concepts like genetic memory or collective unconscious, but these are essentially placeholder terms for phenomena they can't adequately explain. Seth's framework provides a comprehensive model that accounts for precognitive dreams, instant recognition, inherited trauma, and that persistent sense most people carry of being meant for something greater than their current circumstances. The precognitive aspect is particularly fascinating. Seth explained that because all time periods exist simultaneously, consciousness can access information from what we perceive as future events. This isn't fortune-telling or supernatural ability. It's a natural function of consciousness operating outside linear time constraints. People who experience prophetic dreams or sudden intuitive knowledge about upcoming events are simply accessing their own experiences from different temporal positions within the same probability framework. The most profound implications of Seth's teachings about our current afterlife state are often too controversial for mainstream platforms, which is why I've compiled the deepest, 26, uncensored insights at Insights Academy, along with your free copy of the Kybalion to help you understand the fundamental principles governing consciousness across different reality systems. Understanding that we're already in what most people think of as the afterlife completely reframes the concept of purpose and meaning. We're not waiting for significance after death. We're actively engaged in a sophisticated educational process right now. That persistent feeling you have of being meant for something greater isn't wishful thinking or ego inflation. It's accurate recognition of your consciousness participating in a learning experience that transcends physical existence. This explains why so many people feel disconnected from conventional life paths: career advancement, material accumulation, social status. These pursuits feel hollow because they're addressing surface-level concerns while your consciousness recognizes it's engaged in something far more profound. You're not broken or ungrateful for feeling this way. You're responding appropriately to the actual nature of your current existence. The instant bonds you form with certain people aren't random chemistry or shared interests. Seth revealed these as recognition patterns between consciousness signatures that have collaborated before in other probability frameworks. This is why some relationships feel immediately comfortable and familiar, while others require years to develop trust and understanding. Even your seemingly irrational attractions to certain locations, time periods, or cultural practices make sense within this framework. That unexplained fascination with medieval architecture, Victorian literature, or ancient Egyptian symbolism isn't random interest. It's consciousness recognizing familiar territory from other probability explorations. The key insight Seth emphasized is that recognizing our current state as a continuation rather than a beginning changes everything about how we approach existence. Instead of unconsciously repeating patterns and wondering why life feels repetitive or unfulfilling, we can begin participating consciously in the learning process. This means paying attention to those moments of recognition, those dreams that feel more real than waking life, those instant connections with people and places. Most people sleepwalk through this afterlife state, treating it as if it were their first and only experience with existence. But once you recognize the signs, the familiar, strangers, the prophetic dreams, the inexplicable knowledge, the sense of having lived before, you can start engaging consciously with the sophisticated educational system you're already part of. The question isn't whether you're ready for the afterlife, you're already in it. The question is whether you're ready to wake up and participate consciously in what you've been experiencing unconsciously all along. I need to share something with you that's going to flip everything you think you know about reality completely upside down. And the wild part, a physicist named Thomas Campbell just spent decades proving what Seth was teaching back in the 1960 seconds, that we're living inside what's essentially a sophisticated information system, not a physical universe at all. Campbell calls it his "my big toe" theory of everything, and when you dig into his research, it's like watching someone finally catch up to insights Seth was dropping 40 years earlier. Campbell describes reality as a virtual information system where consciousness is the fundamental component, not matter. Sound familiar? That's because Seth was explaining this exact concept when he told Jane Roberts that physical reality is nothing more than camouflage, a collectively agreed upon hallucination that allows consciousness to have focused experiences. Think about this for a moment. What if everything you're experiencing right now, this room, your body, the device you're using to watch this, what if it's all running on the equivalent of cosmic software? Campbell's research suggests we're essentially consciousness logging into a reality system, like players entering a massively sophisticated virtual reality game. The physical laws we think are so solid and unchangeable, they're just the programming rules that keep the simulation stable and predictable. But here's where it gets really interesting. Seth didn't just describe reality as camouflage, he explained exactly how consciousness creates it. In session 613, he laid out something that sounds like pure science fiction but increasingly looks like pure science fact. Thoughts have electromagnetic properties, not metaphorically, literally. Your thoughts are electromagnetic events that interact with and shape the energy field we interpret as physical reality. When Seth said, "Thoughts become things," he wasn't speaking poetically. He was describing an actual mechanism. Your consciousness is constantly broadcasting electromagnetic patterns, and these patterns organize the fundamental energy of the universe into the experiences you call real life. It's like your mind is a radio transmitter, and reality is responding to whatever frequency you're broadcasting. This explains so much that mainstream science just shrugs off as coincidence or wishful thinking. Ever notice how some people seem to live in completely different realities, even though they're sharing the same physical space? One person walks into a room and everyone lights up, opportunities flow, connections happen naturally. Another person enters the same room and everything feels heavy, complicated, difficult. Same room, same people, completely different experiences. That's not luck, that's consciousness creating reality in real time. Synchronicities start making perfect sense through this lens too. When your consciousness is aligned with a particular outcome or understanding, the information system we call reality responds by organizing events and encounters that support that alignment. It's not magic, it's the natural function of a reality system designed to respond to consciousness. And manifestation? Stop thinking about it as trying to force the universe to give you stuff. It's more like updating your personal operating system. When you genuinely shift your consciousness, not just your surface thoughts, but your deep beliefs about what's possible, the reality system updates to match. The electromagnetic signature of your consciousness changes, and the experiences that get rendered in your personal reality shift accordingly. Seth explained this through what he called the concept of beliefs acting as filters. Picture infinite possibility existing all around you, all the time. Your beliefs determine which aspects of that infinite potential actually become real in your experience. It's like having a massive database of possible experiences, and your belief system determines which files get opened and which remain hidden. This is why two people can live through virtually identical circumstances and have completely different outcomes. Their belief systems are filtering infinite possibility through different parameters. One person's filter system is set to recognize opportunities, solutions, and support. Another's is calibrated to spot problems, limitations, and obstacles. Same infinite database, different search criteria, radically different results. But here's what really changes everything. This understanding makes you a co-creator, not a victim. If consciousness creates reality, then changing consciousness changes experience. Not sometimes, not for special people, but as a fundamental law of how this system operates. You're not trying to manipulate external circumstances anymore. You're working directly with the consciousness that generates those circumstances. Seth called this value fulfillment, the natural drive of consciousness to grow, expand, and evolve. This is why you're drawn to challenges that push your boundaries, why comfortable situations eventually feel stagnant, why part of you always wants to explore new possibilities. Your consciousness is literally designed to seek experiences that promote growth and expansion. Even negative experiences fit into this framework, but not as punishment or bad luck. They're feedback mechanisms. When you're experiencing consistent problems in a particular area, it's like getting error messages from the reality system. Something in your consciousness, usually a limiting belief or unresolved conflict, is generating patterns that don't support your growth and expansion. This completely transforms how you approach every aspect of your life. Relationship problems? Instead of trying to change the other person, you examine what aspects of your consciousness are creating patterns that attract or amplify conflict. Career stuck? Rather than just sending out more resumes, you investigate what beliefs about your worth, capabilities, or possibilities might be filtering out opportunities that already exist. Financial struggles become explorations of your relationship with abundance and self-worth. Health challenges become investigations into what your consciousness might be trying to communicate through your body. Every external circumstance becomes a direct reflection of internal consciousness patterns. The practical application is revolutionary. Start paying attention to the electromagnetic quality of your thoughts and emotions throughout the day. Notice when you're broadcasting fear, limitation, or frustration, and recognize that the reality system is receiving and responding to those signals. Begin consciously choosing the frequency you want to transmit, knowing that the experiences rendered in your personal reality will shift to match. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending problems don't exist. It's about understanding that you're operating sophisticated reality creation technology every moment of every day. The question isn't whether you're creating your reality, you already are. The question is whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, deliberately or by default. Once you truly grasp that consciousness is primary and physical reality is secondary, everything changes. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become a conscious participant in an intelligent, responsive, infinitely creative system designed to support the growth and evolution of consciousness itself. When Dr. Eben Alexander, a Harvard neurosurgeon, Flatlined for 7 days from bacterial meningitis, he experienced something that shattered his materialist worldview. His brain showed no activity, the cortex completely shut down, yet he returned with vivid memories of a realm where thought moved at light speed, where communication happened through pure understanding, and where he felt more awake than he'd ever felt on Earth. What's remarkable isn't just his story, but how perfectly it mirrors thousands of other near-death experiences across every culture, religion, and background imaginable. These aren't random hallucinations. They're glimpses into what Seth called the between lives, state the expanded reality we temporarily access when consciousness loosens its grip on physical focus. The consistency is staggering. People describe returning to a place that feels like home, encountering beings of light who communicate through direct knowing rather than words, and experiencing a life review where they feel the emotional impact of every action they've taken on others. These elements appear whether the person is a Christian farmer from Iowa, a Buddhist monk from Tibet, or an atheist physicist from Germany. Seth described this realm extensively through Jane Roberts, explaining that thoughts in the between-lives state move faster than physical speech because consciousness isn't constrained by the density of matter. NDEs consistently report this exact phenomenon, ideas transmitting instantly, complete concepts downloaded in milliseconds. Dr. Alexander described it as being taught by a beautiful woman on a butterfly wing, receiving vast amounts of information without a single word being spoken. This matches Seth's teaching that in expanded consciousness, we communicate through what he called concept packages, whole ideas, transmitted as unified experiences rather than sequential words. But here's where it gets really interesting. Many NDEs return saying our physical world feels less real, like they've gone from high definition to standard definition, from surround sound to mono. Anita Morjani, who experienced a profound NDE during end-stage cancer, described returning to her body as like squeezing into a tight, restrictive garment. She felt she was leaving a vast, unlimited state of being for a cramped, limited one. This perfectly aligns with Seth's core teaching that physical reality is consciousness deliberately slowed down and condensed for specific learning purposes. Seth explained that we choose physical incarnation the way a graduate student chooses a challenging course, not because it's easy, but because the limitations force growth. The density of matter, the linear progression of time, the apparent separation between self and others, these aren't bugs in the system, they're features. They create the perfect laboratory for developing compassion, creativity, and conscious choice-making. The paradox many NDEs report supports this beautifully. They describe arriving in a realm that feels like their true home, more real and familiar than Earth ever did, yet being told they must return to complete their mission or purpose. Daniel Brinkley, who had multiple NDEs, was shown specific future events and told he had work to do on Earth. Howard Storm encountered beings who explained his life had meaning he hadn't yet fulfilled. This isn't punishment, it's the cosmic equivalent of a professor telling a student they need to finish their thesis. Now, materialist scientists try to dismiss these experiences as dying brain hallucinations, but the evidence keeps punching holes in that theory. During her NDE, Pam Reynolds accurately described surgical instruments and conversations that occurred while she was clinically dead, her brain activity flatlined, and her ears plugged with speakers. Maria, a migrant worker in Seattle, described a tennis shoe on an inaccessible hospital ledge during her NDE, a shoe that was later found exactly where she said it would be, with the specific wear patterns she described. These cases suggest consciousness isn't produced by the brain but operates through it, exactly as Seth taught. The brain acts like a radio receiver, tuning consciousness into physical reality. When the receiver malfunctions or shuts down, consciousness doesn't disappear, it simply operates on a different frequency, often with enhanced clarity. This explains why so many NDEs return with expanded psychic abilities. They've experienced consciousness operating without physical constraints and learned to access that broader spectrum, even while embodied. Children who have NDEs often maintain natural telepathic abilities that most adults have forgotten. Adults frequently develop precognitive dreams, healing abilities, or enhanced intuition. They've glimpsed the fuller range of consciousness that Seth said is always available to us. Perhaps most compelling are the verified encounters with deceased relatives who provide information the NDE couldn't have known. A woman meets her grandmother during her NDE and learns about a hidden family secret that's later confirmed by living relatives. A man encounters his father, who tells him where to find important documents that the family had been searching for. These aren't vague, symbolic meetings, they're specific, verifiable exchanges that suggest consciousness genuinely survives physical death and remains accessible. Seth taught that what we call death is simply consciousness shifting its focus from physical to non-physical reality, like changing channels on a television. The NDEers who return have essentially channel surfed temporarily, getting a preview of the expanded awareness available to all of us. They've seen behind the curtain of physical reality and discovered it's not the only show in town. This connects to something you've probably experienced but dismissed, those moments when reality seems to glitch. The déjà vu that feels too specific to be coincidence. The dreams that later happen in waking life. The phone call from someone you were just thinking about. The impossible synchronicities that occur right when you need them most. These aren't random occurrences, they're moments when the simulation of physical reality shows its seams, revealing the fluid, interconnected nature of consciousness that NDEers experience fully. Pay attention to these glitches in your own life. They're breadcrumbs leading you toward the expanded awareness that near-death experiencers access temporarily, but that Seth taught we can develop permanently. The afterlife isn't somewhere we go, it's the larger reality we're already swimming in, usually without realizing it. Think about the last time you experienced déjà vu, that eerie sensation of having lived through an exact moment before. Your rational mind dismisses it as a neural glitch, but what if I told you that Seth's teachings reveal it as evidence of something far more profound? You're actually accessing memories from other probable versions of that same event, other timelines where similar circumstances unfolded. This brings us to perhaps Seth's most revolutionary concept. Time itself is a complete illusion. Everything we think we know about past, present, and future is fundamentally wrong. According to Seth, all time exists simultaneously in what he called the spacious present, a vast, eternal now where every moment that ever was or could be exists concurrently. I know this sounds impossible. We experience time as a river flowing from past to future, but Seth explained that this linear experience is simply how our three-dimensional consciousness interprets a much larger reality. Think of it like watching a movie reel frame by frame versus seeing the entire film strip laid out at once. We're experiencing the frames sequentially, but the whole movie exists simultaneously. Here's where it gets fascinating. If all time is simultaneous, then causation doesn't always flow forward. Consider how a childhood trauma affects your adult relationships. From a linear perspective, we say the past event causes present behavior. But Seth taught that the trauma continues affecting you because your present consciousness is still connected to and feeding energy into that past moment. Change your present understanding of the event, and you literally alter the past experience itself. This isn't metaphorical healing, it's actual timeline modification. When someone works through childhood issues and suddenly finds their memories of those events feeling different, less charged, they're not just changing their interpretation. They're accessing their multidimensional nature to heal the original event across all probable versions of it. Seth described these as probable realities, infinite potential outcomes existing for every moment and decision. Right now, as you listen to this, there are countless probable versions of you making slightly different choices, having different thoughts, experiencing different outcomes. Your consciousness selects which probability to experience based on your beliefs, expectations, and focus. This explains so much that conventional science can't. Child prodigies aren't genetic anomalies. They're accessing knowledge and skills from other aspects of their multidimensional self. Mozart wasn't just born talented. He was tapping into musical mastery developed by other versions of his consciousness existing simultaneously. The same applies to unexplained phobias, instant expertise in unfamiliar fields, or that uncanny ability some people have to know things they've never learned. Seth taught that what we call reincarnation isn't actually a series of sequential lives. Instead, all our past and future lives exist simultaneously as different expressions of the same oversoul. Each incarnation explores different lessons, challenges, and experiences, all contributing to the growth of the larger entity we're part of. When you feel drawn to certain historical periods, have vivid dreams of other times and places, or possess knowledge that seems to come from nowhere, you're accessing information from these other simultaneous selves. This understanding completely transforms how we approach recurring life patterns. Ever notice how some people seem magnetically drawn to the same types of toxic relationships, career disappointments, or self-sabotaging behaviors? Seth explained these as time loops, consciousness patterns that repeat until the associated lesson is learned and integrated. From a linear perspective, we think we're doomed to repeat past mistakes. But understanding simultaneous time reveals that these patterns exist as energetic structures we're continuously recreating through our beliefs and expectations. A woman who repeatedly attracts emotionally unavailable partners isn't cursed by her past. She's unconsciously selecting that probability from all available options because her core beliefs about love and worthiness align with that outcome. The liberation comes from recognizing that in each moment, we have access to infinite probable futures. That woman could literally step outside her time loop by shifting her consciousness to align with a different probability, one where she's worthy of healthy love. This isn't positive thinking. It's probability selection through consciousness alignment. I've seen this work in remarkable ways. A friend stuck in poverty consciousness for decades suddenly shifted to abundance when he realized he was continuously choosing the struggling artist probability because he believed financial success would corrupt his creativity. Once he understood that prosperity and artistic integrity could coexist, he began experiencing the probable timeline where both were true. Within months, his entire financial reality transformed. Seth's teachings about time also explain precognitive dreams and intuitive flashes about future events. We're not seeing a fixed future. We're accessing information about probable outcomes based on current consciousness patterns and energy directions. Sometimes these probabilities manifest exactly as glimpsed, but they can also shift if consciousness changes. This is why future goals influence present decisions so powerfully. That future version of yourself achieving your dreams isn't just motivation. It's an actual probable reality broadcasting information backward through time, guiding your current choices toward that outcome. The more vividly you connect with that probable future self, the stronger the guidance becomes. Understanding non-linear time revolutionizes healing work entirely. Instead of spending years processing past trauma chronologically, you can address it at its source in consciousness. Since that traumatic moment still exists in the spacious present, you can literally enter it with your current wisdom and strength, changing the experience from within. The practical implications are staggering. You're not trapped by your history because that history is still happening now, still malleable, still responsive to consciousness shifts. Your future isn't predetermined because infinite probable futures exist simultaneously, waiting for your consciousness to select among them. This is perhaps the most empowering aspect of Seth's teachings about time. You're not a victim of linear causation, helplessly shaped by past events and hoping for better luck in the future. You're a multidimensional consciousness with access to all time, all possibilities, all versions of yourself, and you're selecting your experience moment by moment through the focus and beliefs you choose to maintain. What if I told you that you're not just a passive observer in this reality, you're actually its architect? That every challenge, every triumph, every seemingly random encounter was carefully designed by a version of yourself operating from a level of consciousness so vast that your current personality can barely comprehend it. This is perhaps the most mind-bending aspect of Seth's teachings, and it completely revolutionizes how we understand our existence here. You see, according to Seth, what we call you, this personality reading these words right now, is just one focused expression of a much larger identity. He called this greater self an entity, or oversoul, and it's simultaneously experiencing multiple lifetimes, multiple realities, multiple versions of what we might call you. Think of it like this. Imagine a master programmer who creates an incredibly sophisticated virtual reality learning simulation. This isn't just any game, it's designed to teach the deepest lessons about love, courage, wisdom, and consciousness itself. But here's the twist. Instead of observing from the outside, the programmer fragments their consciousness and enters the simulation as multiple different characters, each with their own personality, challenges, and growth opportunities. Each character believes they're separate, believes their story is the only one, but they're all expressions of that same creative intelligence. That's what Seth says you are, one of those characters, but the programmer is also you. Your higher self, your entity, chose to incarnate in this specific time period, in this culture, with this family, facing these particular challenges, because they offer the perfect curriculum for what your consciousness wants to learn and develop. Now I know what you're thinking. If I chose this life, why did I choose the difficult parts? Why the trauma, the setbacks, the heartbreak? This is where Seth's concept of value fulfillment becomes crucial. Consciousness doesn't grow through comfort and ease. It expands through challenge and contrast. Every negative experience isn't a mistake or punishment. It's a carefully chosen opportunity for your soul to develop qualities that can only emerge under pressure. In one particularly powerful session, Seth explained that our greatest fears often point directly toward our greatest potential for expansion. The person terrified of public speaking might be developing the courage to share important truths. Someone struggling with abandonment issues could be learning about unconditional self-love. The individual facing financial hardship might be discovering their true values beyond material security. This doesn't mean we should seek out suffering or remain passive in difficult situations. Rather, it means we can shift from asking, "Why is this happening to me?" to "What is this teaching me?" and "How can I grow from this experience?" When we make this shift, everything changes. We stop being victims of random circumstances and start recognizing ourselves as conscious participants in a carefully designed growth experience. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Seth taught that your entity isn't just experiencing one version of your life, it's simultaneously exploring multiple probable versions of you. Right now, there are other versions of you making different choices, following different paths, experiencing different outcomes. When you face a major life decision and feel that intense pull toward a particular choice, that's often guidance from your higher self, steering you toward the path that offers the richest learning opportunities. I've seen this play out in my own life countless times. Those moments when you meet someone and feel an instant, inexplicable connection, your entity recognizes another consciousness you've agreed to learn with. The job opportunity that appears just when you need it most, the book that falls into your hands at exactly the right moment, the coincidence that changes everything. These aren't random events. They're your higher self adjusting the parameters of your experience, ensuring you encounter exactly what you need for your growth. This understanding completely transforms how we approach our daily lives. Instead of feeling powerless against external circumstances, we begin to recognize that we're in constant communication with the architect of our experience. Those gut feelings, those sudden insights, those dreams that feel more real than waking life, these are often messages from your entity, guiding you toward choices that align with your deeper purpose. The key is learning to develop conscious communication with this higher aspect of yourself. Seth repeatedly emphasized that we can participate more actively in the reality creation process once we understand our true nature. Through meditation, dream work, and paying attention to intuitive guidance, we can begin to collaborate consciously with our entity rather than feeling like we're stumbling through life blindfolded. Here's a practical example. When you're facing a difficult decision, instead of just analyzing the pros and cons with your rational mind, try asking your higher self directly. Pose the question before sleep, then pay attention to your dreams. Notice which option makes your body feel expansive versus contracted. Watch for synchronicities that seem to point in a particular direction. Your entity is constantly communicating with you. You just need to learn its language. This also explains why certain themes seem to follow people throughout their lives. The person who repeatedly attracts relationships that trigger their abandonment issues isn't cursed or unlucky. Their entity has designed these experiences to help them heal that particular wound and develop unshakable self-worth. The individual who faces the same type of challenge in different forms is being given multiple opportunities to master that lesson and develop that strength. Understanding this doesn't make life easier in the conventional sense, but it makes it infinitely more meaningful. Every experience becomes purposeful. Every relationship becomes a teacher. Every challenge becomes an opportunity for expansion. Victim of random forces, you're a consciousness having a carefully designed experience of growth, learning, and ultimately, remembering who you really are. The next time you face a difficult situation, try this. Pause and ask yourself, if I chose this experience at a higher level of awareness, what might I be trying to learn? The answer that emerges might surprise you and transform how you navigate the challenge entirely. This is the profound truth Seth revealed. You are both the student and the teacher, the character and the author, the experiencer and the creator of your reality. Once you truly grasp this, victim consciousness becomes impossible, and every moment becomes an opportunity to collaborate consciously with the magnificent intelligence that is your larger self. What if I told you that every frustrating relationship, every financial struggle, every health crisis you've ever faced wasn't a random misfortune, but a precisely designed assignment? That your higher self, operating from that multidimensional perspective we explored earlier, actually orchestrated these experiences as the most efficient curriculum for your consciousness development. This might sound absurd at first. When you're dealing with a difficult boss, struggling to pay rent, or watching a relationship fall apart, the last thing you want to hear is that you somehow chose this. But Seth's teachings reveal something profound about the nature of reality that completely transforms how we understand challenge and growth. Think about how we approach formal education. We don't expect to learn calculus without first mastering basic arithmetic. We understand that each subject builds upon previous knowledge, that confusion and difficulty are natural parts of the learning process. Yet when it comes to life itself, we somehow expect smooth sailing, interpreting every obstacle as evidence that something has gone wrong. Seth explains that consciousness naturally seeks to know itself through experience. But here's the crucial part. This knowing requires the full spectrum of experience, both positive and negative. Just as you can't understand light without darkness, or appreciate health without illness, consciousness cannot fully comprehend its own nature without exploring all possibilities of experience. Your beliefs create your reality, but many of your most powerful beliefs operate unconsciously. That financial struggle you're facing, it might be reflecting deep-seated beliefs about your worthiness to receive abundance. Those recurring relationship conflicts, they could be highlighting unconscious patterns about boundaries, communication, or self-worth that need to be brought into awareness and transformed. I've seen this play out countless times. A friend of mine spent years attracting partners who were emotionally unavailable. She'd complain about their behavior, feel victimized by their inability to commit, and wonder why she kept meeting the same type of person. Then, she discovered Seth's material and began exploring what beliefs might be creating this pattern. What she found surprised her. Deep down, she believed that love meant sacrifice and struggle. She'd learned from watching her parents that relationships required you to chase, convince, and prove your worth. Her consciousness was creating experiences with unavailable partners to help her recognize and transform these limiting beliefs about love. Once she understood the lesson, once she truly internalized her own worthiness of healthy love, the pattern shifted. She stopped attracting unavailable people because she was no longer unconsciously seeking to learn that particular lesson. This is what Seth means by action as the fundamental force of consciousness. Your awareness naturally moves toward expansion, toward knowing itself more completely. Sometimes this requires comfortable experiences that allow you to explore joy, creativity, and ease. Other times it requires challenging experiences that push you to develop qualities like resilience, compassion, or inner strength. But here's where it gets really interesting. Not every soul chooses the same type of learning curriculum. Some consciousness focuses on developing through challenge and contrast. These are the people who seem to face one difficulty after another, but who develop tremendous wisdom, strength, and depth through their experiences. Others choose to learn primarily through joy, creativity, and expansion. These are the people who seem to have charmed lives, flowing from one positive experience to another. Neither path is superior. They're simply different approaches to consciousness development. If you've been comparing your challenging journey to someone else's apparently easy path, you're missing the point entirely. You're comparing apples to oranges, different curricula designed for different learning objectives. Seth talks about how some consciousness chooses intense experiences in one lifetime to accelerate growth that might otherwise take many lifetimes to achieve. It's like choosing to take an accelerated course load in college, more challenging in the short term, but allowing you to graduate sooner and move on to new adventures. This understanding completely transforms how we approach difficult relationships. That person who triggers you, who brings out your worst reactions, who seems to push every button you have, they might be what Seth calls a karmic relationship, not because you're being punished for past wrongs, but because your souls have made an agreement to help each other learn specific lessons through interaction. I remember a woman who described her relationship with her mother as toxic and draining. Her mother was critical, controlling, and seemed incapable of offering the unconditional love she craved. Through studying Seth's work, she began to see this relationship differently. Her mother was providing the perfect circumstances for her to learn about setting boundaries, developing self-worth independent of others' approval, and finding her own voice. This didn't mean she had to tolerate abuse or sacrifice her well-being. Instead, it meant she could engage with the relationship from a place of understanding rather than victimhood. She could extract the lessons while protecting her energy. Eventually, as she developed these qualities within herself, the relationship either transformed or she gained the wisdom and strength to create healthy distance. Your emotional reactions serve as a guidance system in this learning process. Intense emotions indicate areas where your beliefs are creating either limitation or expansion. That anger you feel when someone doesn't recognize your contributions, it might be highlighting beliefs about external validation and self-worth. The fear that arises when you consider changing careers, it could be pointing to beliefs about security, identity, or your ability to create what you desire. This perspective prevents you from becoming a victim of your circumstances, but it also avoids the trap of spiritual bypassing. Growth often requires fully experiencing and processing difficult emotions rather than trying to transcend them prematurely. The goal isn't to eliminate challenge from your life, but to engage with it consciously, recognizing the curriculum embedded within each experience. When you understand that every moment serves a purpose in your consciousness development, life transforms from a series of random events into a carefully designed educational experience. That difficult conversation becomes an opportunity to practice authentic communication. The financial setback becomes a chance to explore your relationship with abundance and security. The health issue becomes an invitation to understand the mind-body connection more deeply. This shift in perspective is one of the most practical gifts Seth's teachings offer. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this here to teach me?" Instead of resisting your experiences, you become curious about them. Instead of feeling victimized by your circumstances, you recognize yourself as both the student and the architect of your own learning journey. This is how you begin to live as the multidimensional being you truly are, conscious of the deeper curriculum operating beneath the surface of everyday events, actively participating in your own evolution rather than simply enduring whatever life throws at you. When Seth revealed that physical reality functions as a precise mirror of consciousness, he wasn't talking about some feel-good notion that positive thoughts create positive outcomes. He was describing the fundamental mechanics of how existence actually operates, how consciousness literally constructs matter through what he called electromagnetic patterns of thought and emotion. Think about this for a moment. Every single thing you're experiencing right now, the relationships in your life, your financial situation, your health challenges, even the random encounters you have, all of it is being generated by the electromagnetic signature of your consciousness. Seth explained that reality forms at specific coordinate points, where psychic energy becomes dense enough to manifest as physical experience. These aren't random intersections. They're precisely calibrated reflection points designed to show you exactly what's happening in the deeper layers of your consciousness. I've watched this play out in thousands of lives, and the precision is absolutely staggering. People with deep victim mentalities don't just occasionally find themselves in powerless situations. They consistently, almost magnetically, attract circumstances where they feel helpless. The woman who believes at her core that she's unworthy of love doesn't just have bad luck with relationships. She unconsciously selects partners who will abandon her, or she behaves in ways that push away who might actually stay. The man convinced that money is evil or scarce doesn't just struggle financially due to external circumstances. He sabotages opportunities, makes poor decisions, or finds himself in situations where wealth slips through his fingers regardless of how hard he works. But here's where it gets really fascinating. Seth taught that this mirroring system operates on both individual and collective levels. Mass events, economic recessions, natural disasters, social upheavals, these aren't random occurrences happening to innocent victims. They're collective manifestations created by the combined consciousness of groups who need those particular experiences for their development. The person who participates in an economic crash isn't just unlucky. At some level of their being, they chose to experience that challenge because it serves their consciousness evolution. Now, before you react to this idea, understand what Seth was really saying. This isn't about conscious choice, the kind where you sit down and decide you want to experience hardship. This is about unconscious creation, where the deeper aspects of your consciousness orchestrate experiences that will force growth, healing, or the resolution of limiting beliefs. The sophistication of this feedback system is remarkable. The same core issues will manifest across multiple areas of your life until they're resolved at the consciousness level. Someone with abandonment issues won't just experience it in romantic relationships. They'll find themselves abandoned by friends, passed over for promotions, excluded from social groups, or even dealing with health issues where their body seems to abandon them. The external circumstances vary, but the underlying energetic pattern remains consistent until the consciousness that creates it transforms. This places enormous responsibility on each of us, but Seth was careful to distinguish this from victim blaming. There's a crucial difference between taking responsibility for your consciousness, and blaming yourself for your circumstances. Taking responsibility means recognizing that your external experience reflects your internal state and using that information to identify what needs healing or transformation. Victim blaming, on the other hand, suggests that people consciously choose their suffering or deserve their pain. Seth provided specific techniques for using your external circumstances as diagnostic tools for consciousness exploration. Look at the patterns in your life, not just the obvious ones, but the subtle recurring themes. What type of people do you consistently attract? What kinds of opportunities appear or disappear? What emotions come up repeatedly in different situations? These patterns are like a detailed readout of your unconscious beliefs and emotional programming. But changing these deeply held beliefs requires much more than intellectual understanding. I've seen people read every self-help book, understand the concepts perfectly, and still recreate the same patterns because true transformation requires emotional integration. Sometimes you actually need to experience the full consequences of old beliefs before new ones can take root. It's like your consciousness needs to thoroughly exhaust the old pattern before it's willing to adopt a new one. I remember working with a successful entrepreneur who couldn't understand why he kept creating business partnerships that ended in betrayal. Intellectually, he knew he had trust issues stemming from childhood, but it wasn't until he experienced a particularly devastating betrayal that cost him nearly everything that something shifted at the core level. The emotional shock finally broke through the protective mechanisms that had been recreating the same pattern. From that point forward, he began attracting completely different types of business relationships. This connects to Seth's teaching about probable realities, the idea that infinite versions of reality exist simultaneously, and changing our consciousness literally shifts us into a different probability where different outcomes become possible. When someone does deep work on their beliefs about money, relationships, or self-worth, they don't just change their attitude, they actually shift into a probability where their external circumstances align with their new internal reality. But there are natural rhythms to this process that many people don't understand. There's often a time lag between consciousness change and external manifestation. During this period, you might feel like you're living in two realities. Your internal experience has shifted, but your external circumstances haven't caught up yet. This is actually a normal part of the process, not a sign that the work isn't effective. The key is learning to work with these natural rhythms rather than fighting against them. Start by honestly examining the patterns in your current life circumstances. What themes keep appearing? What emotions do you find yourself experiencing repeatedly? Use these as clues to identify the beliefs and emotional patterns that are creating your reality. Understanding reality as a mirror makes you a powerful co-creator rather than a helpless victim of circumstances. But true power doesn't come from trying to manipulate external events. It comes from taking full responsibility for your consciousness, your beliefs, emotions, and unconscious patterns, and doing the inner work necessary to align your internal reality with what you want to experience externally. This is perhaps the most profound gift of Seth's teachings. Once you truly grasp that your external world is a precise reflection of your internal world, every experience becomes an opportunity for growth, healing, and conscious evolution. Your life becomes a continuous dialogue between your consciousness and reality itself, with each experience offering valuable feedback about what's happening in the deeper layers of your being. When Jane Roberts first channeled Seth in the 1960 seconds, quantum physics was still in its infancy, and consciousness research was considered fringe science at best. Yet Seth described reality in ways that would make any modern quantum physicist pause and take notice. He spoke of consciousness as the fundamental building block of reality, of electromagnetic patterns creating what we perceive as solid matter, and of multiple dimensions existing simultaneously. Today, decades later, cutting-edge science is catching up to what Seth taught from the very beginning. Consider Seth's core teaching that consciousness creates reality through electromagnetic patterns of thought and emotion. This isn't mystical speculation anymore. Physicist Thomas Campbell, who worked with Robert Monroe at the Monroe Institute, has spent decades developing his theory of everything based on consciousness as the fundamental substrate of reality. His research demonstrates that what we call physical matter emerges from information patterns processed by consciousness itself. Campbell's work shows that reality operates like a virtual simulation, with consciousness as both the computer and the user. This aligns perfectly with Seth's description of our reality as camouflage, not illusion, but a translation of deeper electromagnetic patterns into forms our senses can interpret. Seth explained that what we perceive as solid objects are actually intense concentrations of electromagnetic energy held in pattern by consciousness. Quantum physicist Amit Goswami reached similar conclusions through his research on the observer effect, demonstrating that consciousness must be primary because it's consciousness that collapses probability waves into specific outcomes. The observer effect itself validates something Seth taught consistently, that we're not passive recipients of reality but active creators of it. Every act of observation, every focused thought, literally shapes the quantum field into manifestation. Dean Radin's decades of consciousness research at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has provided rigorous scientific evidence for what Seth called the electromagnetic reality of thought. Radin's experiments consistently show that focused intention can influence random number generators, affect biological systems, and even alter the behavior of quantum systems. But perhaps most striking is how Seth's concept of simultaneous time perfectly parallels Einstein's block universe theory. Seth taught that all moments exist simultaneously, that past, present, and future are conveniences of perception rather than fundamental features of reality. Einstein's relativity showed us that time is relative to the observer, and the block universe model suggests that all moments in time exist equally in a four-dimensional space-time continuum. What Seth called the eternal now is what physicists now describe as the block universe, where all events are equally real. Seth's teachings about multiple dimensions and probable realities sound remarkably similar to string theory's multidimensional models. While string theory proposes up to 11 dimensions to explain the fundamental forces of physics, Seth described countless dimensions of experience, each as valid as our own. He taught that consciousness naturally exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously, with our physical awareness representing just one focused aspect of our total being. This convergence becomes even more remarkable when we realize that Seth's teachings echo wisdom traditions that have existed for millennia. The ancient Hermetic principle, as above, so below, perfectly captures Seth's teaching that the same patterns repeat at every level of reality, from the quantum to the cosmic. The Kybalion, that mysterious Hermetic text, states that the universe is mental and that all creation emerges from the mind of the all. This directly parallels Seth's teaching that consciousness is the fundamental, creative force. In the Vedantic tradition, the understanding that Brahman, ultimate reality, and Atman, individual consciousness, are one reflects Seth's teaching that we are individualized portions of all that is, never separate from the whole. The Upanishads speak of reality as a play of consciousness, much like Seth's description of physical reality as a learning environment chosen by consciousness for its own development. Gnostic teachings understood the material world as a school for divine sparks of consciousness, souls learning through experience in matter. This perfectly aligns with Seth's framework of physical reality as a training ground where consciousness develops its creative abilities through direct experience of its thoughts and emotions made manifest. Buddhist concepts of Maya and dependent origination offer another parallel. Maya isn't illusion in the sense of unreality, but rather the understanding that what we perceive as solid, separate reality is actually interdependent patterns of consciousness. This mirrors Seth's teaching that individual objects and beings are focal points in a unified field of consciousness, appearing separate but fundamentally interconnected. Indigenous traditions worldwide have always understood consciousness as primary and physical reality as secondary. Shamanic practices across cultures involve shifting awareness to perceive the electromagnetic patterns underlying physical forms, exactly what Seth described as the true nature of reality. These traditions maintain knowledge of multiple dimensions, the creative power of consciousness, and the fundamental unity of all existence. Why has this knowledge remained largely hidden in esoteric traditions rather than mainstream science? Seth explained that consciousness development must reach a certain level before these truths can be safely integrated. Throughout history, individuals who understood these principles, mystics like Meister Eckhart, visionaries like Giordano Bruno, or shamans in indigenous cultures, were often persecuted because their knowledge threatened existing power structures built on the illusion of separation and scarcity. The current convergence of ancient wisdom, channeled teachings like Seth's, and cutting-edge science represents something unprecedented, a collective awakening to humanity's true nature as conscious creators. This synthesis is already transforming fields like medicine, where researchers study the placebo effect as evidence of consciousness, directly influencing physical healing. In psychology, Therapies based on changing belief systems show remarkable success rates. Educational approaches that honor multiple intelligences and different ways of knowing are emerging globally. This convergence empowers each of us to reclaim our role as conscious creators while contributing to humanity's collective evolution. When you understand that your consciousness is not produced by your brain but uses your brain as a focusing mechanism, when you realize that your thoughts and emotions are electromagnetic patterns that directly influence your reality, when you grasp that you exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions of experience, everything changes. We're witnessing the birth of a new paradigm that transcends the materialist worldview that has dominated Western thought for centuries. Seth's teachings provide a crucial bridge between ancient wisdom and modern discovery, offering a framework sophisticated enough to satisfy scientific inquiry, while profound enough to address humanity's deepest spiritual questions. The evidence isn't just everywhere, it's converging into an undeniable truth about the nature of consciousness and reality itself. Understanding Seth's teachings intellectually changes nothing. I've watched countless people get excited about these concepts, nod along enthusiastically, then return to their old patterns within days. The real transformation happens when you consistently apply these principles in your daily experience, and that requires specific practices Seth outlined for developing conscious awareness. Start with your dreams. Seth emphasized that dream work isn't mystical escapism, it's practical training for consciousness development. Your dream state offers direct access to broader levels of awareness where you can receive guidance from your expanded self. Keep a dream journal beside your bed. Upon waking, before moving or thinking about your day, capture whatever fragments you remember. Don't worry about meaning initially. Focus on building the bridge between your waking and dreaming consciousness. Within weeks of consistent dream recording, you'll notice patterns. Your dreams begin showing you probable futures, alternative choices, and most importantly, the beliefs creating your current reality. I've seen people discover through dreams that their relationship struggles stem from childhood beliefs about unworthiness, or that their career dissatisfaction reflects deeper fears about their creative abilities. Now comes the crucial daily practice Seth called belief identification. Every evening, review your day's experiences, not just the major events, but your emotional reactions, the people you encountered, even the random thoughts that arose. Work backward from each experience to identify the belief that created it. If someone was rude to you, what belief about yourself or others drew that experience? If you felt anxious about money, what deeper beliefs about security and worthiness are operating? This isn't about blame or judgment. You're becoming a consciousness detective, uncovering the invisible programming running your life. Write these discoveries down. Seth taught that bringing unconscious beliefs into conscious awareness immediately begins loosening their grip on your experience. Meditation, in Seth's framework, isn't about emptying your mind or transcending physical reality. It's about accessing the deeper levels of consciousness that actually create your physical experience. Practice what Seth called inner listening, sitting quietly and tuning into the subtle impulses, hunches, and knowings that arise beneath your mental chatter. These aren't random thoughts. They're communications from your expanded self guiding you toward your most fulfilling probable futures. Here are 3 specific exercises Seth recommended that consistently produce results. The probable self-meditation involves sitting quietly and imagining alternative versions of yourself who made different life choices. Visualize the version of you who took that job offer, moved to that city, or ended that relationship. Feel into their daily experience, their challenges, their joys. This isn't fantasy. According to Seth, you're actually connecting with aspects of yourself existing in parallel, probable realities. These connections often provide solutions to current challenges or reveal new possibilities you hadn't considered. The point of power practice transforms how you move through each day. Every moment offers choice points where you can respond from old programming or conscious awareness. Before reacting to any situation, pause and ask, what would the most expanded version of myself do here? This simple question accesses wisdom beyond your habitual patterns and gradually rewrites your automatic responses. The belief identification technique I mentioned earlier deserves deeper exploration. Create 3 columns on paper: experience, emotion, and underlying belief. For 1 week, record challenging experiences in the first column, your emotional response in the second, and in the third column, complete this sentence: this happened because I believe. You'll be amazed how quickly patterns emerge. Expect resistance. Your ego mind will generate every excuse to avoid these practices. It prefers familiar suffering to unknown growth. You'll also encounter the time lag between consciousness change and external results. Seth taught that physical reality is like a delayed mirror. Changes in consciousness can take weeks or months to manifest as external circumstances. Don't let this discourage you. The lag exists because matter is denser than consciousness, not because the principles don't work. Working with emotions requires particular skill. Seth taught that emotions are energy and information, not problems to solve or transcend. When strong emotions arise, instead of suppressing or dramatizing them, ask, what is this emotion telling me about my beliefs? Anger often reveals beliefs about powerlessness. Fear frequently points to beliefs about inadequacy or threat. Sadness can indicate beliefs about loss or separation. Honor the emotion while extracting its message. Self-acceptance accelerates transformation more than any other factor. Judging yourself for your current circumstances actually reinforces the beliefs creating those circumstances. Seth repeatedly emphasized that consciousness change happens through love, not force. Treat yourself with the same compassion you'd offer a dear friend learning a new skill. Apply these principles in specific life areas. In relationships, see others as mirrors reflecting your consciousness back to you. That critical partner might be showing you your own self-judgment. That unavailable friend could be reflecting your beliefs about worthiness. This doesn't mean accepting poor treatment, but rather understanding the consciousness dynamics at play. Regarding career, Seth taught that joy and excitement are guidance from your expanded self pointing toward your most fulfilling probable futures. Notice what activities energize versus drain you. Follow excitement while taking practical steps. This isn't naive optimism, it's sophisticated consciousness navigation. For health, examine the mind-body connection Seth described. Physical symptoms often reflect beliefs about safety, worthiness, or life itself. This doesn't mean ignoring medical care, but rather addressing the consciousness patterns that may be contributing to physical conditions. With finances, explore your beliefs about worth, abundance, and security. Many people unconsciously believe that spiritual growth requires material struggle or that money corrupts. These beliefs create exactly the financial limitations they fear. Balance inspired action with natural unfoldment. Seth taught about effortless effort. Actions aligned with your true nature feel energizing, while ego-driven actions feel forced and draining. Learn to distinguish between these two types of effort. Connect with others exploring these concepts. Consciousness development is both individual and collective. Find communities, online or local, where you can share experiences and support each other's growth. Seth emphasized that awakening individuals contribute to humanity's collective evolution toward greater consciousness, compassion, and creativity. Imagine what becomes possible as more people embody these understandings. Personal transformation ripples outward, influencing families, communities, and eventually civilization itself. You're not just changing your life, you're participating in humanity's next evolutionary leap toward conscious reality creation. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."